Laurie, you're undoubtedly one of the greatest trainers of all time in New Zealand. When you came to Singapore back in 2000, what was the reason for the change? Just a new challenge?
Yeah, well, I got actually tired of travelling. I used to go to Australia a lot and all over New Zealand, and always liked the concept of Hong Kong, where it was so efficient, you know, just the 2 race courses and not so much travelling. But I missed the opportunity to go there. But anyway, the commentator at the time was a New Zealander here called George Simon, and it was 1999. And he rang me up. He said, "Would you like to come to Singapore?" I said, "Well, not really. I'm sick of travelling. I don't want to go to Ipoh and Penang and KL and all those places, you know." He said, "No, it's all changed now. So they've just built a new race course," and told me what the prize money was, and he said, "You should come up and have a look." Talked to my wife Sheila about it, and she said, "Well, you should go and have a look." So I actually had a horse racing in the Darwin Cup at the time that Russell Cameron was training for me, and so it was the first Monday in August, and so I went up there and watched him race and came on up here to Singapore, and I liked what I saw. So made up my mind, and I looked at the place in August, and I was here by the end of October.
Well, that was 13 years ago. What was Singapore like back then? What was the standard of racing like?
It's pretty good. Well, it's so efficient, you know. They race about 50 times a year, and on one race course. It's no travelling. You don't have to float the horses to the races. It's really like going to heaven without having to die, as far as a horse trainer is concerned.
Well, we could sit here for hours and talk about all the great horses you've trained, but a couple of highlights, probably 1988, Empire Rose wins the Melbourne Cup. What are your memories of that?
Well, winning a Melbourne Cup is sort of something that usually happens to somebody else, you know, and when it happens to you, it's just hard to believe. Yeah.
Then in 1993, Romney Conti, you win the Hong Kong International Cup. You become a truly international figure.
Yeah, well, Hong Kong International, that was really a great race, and of course then Romney Conti went to stud and become the mother of Ethereal. Actually, that Hong Kong International race was probably one of the best fields I've ever had. You had River Verdon, who won the previous Hong Kong Cup, and Motivation, who won the next Hong Kong Cup. And there was a horse called Fra, who'd went on to win the Caulfield Cup. But the most significant thing about it, the horse that ran 5th in the race, was the mare Urban Sea, who won the next Arc de Triomphe and become the mother of Galileo and See the Stars. So when you put it all together, it's probably something that might never happen again.
That really stands Romney Conti in great stead then, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. She was probably the best horse I ever trained never to win a Group 1.
So many highlights. Can you isolate one of your biggest thrills in racing?
Oh, probably when I was riding as an amateur, you ride your first winner, you never sort of forget that. And when I trained my first winner, it was a bit slow to get going, but was a horse called Matoko at Ellerslie, yeah, and was ridden by Ron Taylor, who rode Polo Prince to win the Melbourne Cup, and it beat my parents' horse called LKL. He ran 2nd.
You've been champion trainer here now 7 times. What motivates you and keeps you getting out of bed every morning?
Well, I've got good people working for me, and I don't care whether it's whatever business you're in, whether it's horse training or anything. You've got to surround yourself with the best people, whether for your staff, your assistants, and the jockeys that ride for you. And I think after that, just everything should fall into place.
And not only the 7 premierships, but you've set records here that you've broken yourself of in excess of 100 winners a year.
Yeah, we won 104 races in 1 year. It was pretty good, and I think the year before that we won 100. I'm probably only a few winners off about 25 or 26 of training 1,000 winners on this racetrack. And
it's no mean feat training over 100 winners when you consider how many horses there are here on the island. Yeah,
that's right. It's but I've been fortunate. I've sourced a lot of my horses from New Zealand, most of them, although I've trained some pretty good horses that have actually come out of Australia, like Recast. He was an Australian bred horse. He won the Singapore Gold Cup, and Raoul come out of Perth. He won the Singapore Gold Cup. But most of my horses do come from New Zealand.
You touched on the fact that you're rapidly closing on 1,000 winners. Is that sort of the driving thing for you now, or is there something else that you want to achieve?
Well, I think, yeah, I don't know whether anybody has trained 1,000 winners on one race course anywhere in the world. Maybe in Argentina or somewhere, I don't know, but it's just going to be a milestone, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, there aren't too many big races that have eluded Laurie Laxon up here in Singapore, but is there some major highlights or something that you haven't won here that you're striving for?
The only two that I haven't won is the SIA International, although I've had horses been placed in it a couple of times, and the Chris Flyer Sprint, and I've also had horses been placed in that as well. But they're the two left to get.
It's probably a difficult question for you, but what are the sort of the horses that really stick in your mind that you've trained here in Singapore that have been very successful?
Well, I've been fortunate that I've had quite a lot. I've had the Horse of the Year 5 times. Like horses like YB was a champion sprinter. He was Horse of the Year twice. A horse called Big Easy. Better Than Ever is probably the best horse I've trained since I've been in Singapore. And he didn't win the Horse of the Year because he was racing at the same time as Rocket Man, who was an international horse. Waikato, which I own myself, he's been very, very kind to me. He won over $3 million, and I've just retired him, and he's about to waiting to fly home to New Zealand to retire. I've got an up-and-coming horse called Hooker Falls, who's had 8 starts for 7 wins, and I hope he's the horse that's going to take Waikato's place.
Well, I want to touch on those because there's quite a pattern emerging there. You name a lot of your horses after places in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I come from the Waikato, and I've always been one of the river people. I've always lived close to the river. Waikato River is a river that runs from Lake Taupo right out to Port Waikato, and it's got a lot of hydro dams on it and a lot of lakes. And I've named, like, my first horse Waikato, and then the next one was Arapuni, and then Waipapa and Maraetai, and all the way up the river, and now we're almost to Lake Taupo with Hooker Falls. So it's quite timely.
You're probably giving race calls through Singapore Nightmares just trying to get the pronunciations correct.
Yes, I've got a good one coming up for them too. I'm going to call a horse Pokai Whenua.
Well, you touched on Waikato. I know he's one that's particularly close to your heart. He's been very successful for you, and he's about to go home and have a comfy retirement. Yes,
I plan to send him home, and my friend Peter Vella, he's kindly offered that he could go to Pencarrow Stud and become a nursemaid for the foals when they win their foals. So he'll be a nice quiet gelding, and he'll be in grass up to his knees and loving it.
Jockeys. You've probably seen plenty of bad rides in your time, and you've probably seen plenty of good ones. Who do you rate as some of the better jockeys you've seen in your time?
Well, I was the first one to take Shane Dye to Australia when he was an apprentice. I took him over to ride a horse called La Grigia in the Caulfield Cup. It didn't actually run in the Caulfield Cup, but I took him over then. I've had Greg Childs. He's ridden a lot of winners for me. He won the Hong Kong International. Mick Dittman, dynamic jockey. He's rode a lot of winners for me. He rode Marquise when it won in Adelaide, and he rode winners for me here in Hong Kong. Probably the best jockey that's done the most so soon that I've seen is a boy called James McDonald. He's just sensational what his statistics read at. When I've had Lance O'Sullivan ride many winners for me. Basically, it's hard to single anyone out as at the risk of offending another, but they've all been very good.
If we put you in charge of racing tomorrow and you could make one change to the industry, what would you like to do?
I wouldn't like to do anything here in Singapore. I think it's as good as it gets, but as far as New Zealand racing goes, I think that they should sell Avondale, get rid of Pukekohe, put the president and the vice president of Avondale and Pukekohe on the board of the Auckland Racing Club, and race at Ellerslie every week. Have 10 of the best horse trainers in New Zealand with boxes on LSE, 50 each, have 500 horses on course all the time and take the racing to the people. And I think that's what New Zealand racing is lacking at the moment. I know it all sounds too simple, but if they did it, it'd make a hell of a difference.
Away from racing in the track, what does Laurie Laxon like to do with his spare time?
I like to cook. I quite cook. I cook all my own meals and
Signature dish?
all sorts of anything. I cook all sorts of things. I love it, especially with the Google search now of anything that you might want to research. There's hundreds of recipes. I find it quite relaxing.
Well, my next question was going to be, what would Laurie Laxon be doing if he wasn't a trainer? But I think you might have just answered that, a chef.
Not so much. Actually, horses are my hobby. I'm actually a fully qualified carpenter. I did a 5-year apprenticeship as a carpenter, and 5 years after I built my first 3 houses. First one physically myself, and the other 2 under labour-only contractors. And but horses are my hobby. I think it's in my blood. My great-grandfather was racing horses in New Zealand when the Maoris were still eating each other, and in 1850 or 1840 he went to New Zealand, and so that's my great-grandfather. My grandfather raced horses and my father, so it's just a hobby for me. I think it's a lot of things are hereditary.
And for anyone thinking about getting involved in racing in Singapore, what sort of message would you want to give to them?
Well, you've got to be efficient. You've got to run your stable like a military operation and get results. And well, everybody knows the harder you work, the luckier you get. So it's not so much about working hard yourself. It's about being able to be what you call a 1-minute manager, that you make 1-minute goals, 1-minute praises. Try and catch your staff doing something right. I think that's most important. Anybody can catch them doing something wrong.
And you might have already touched on this, but a horse we might be able to follow from the Laurie Laxon stable for this coming feature season?
Oh, hard to know without looking at my list. Of course, Hooker Falls is pretty established now, but we had a couple of good trial winners yesterday, but haven't raced yet. But I've got one horse there. He's by Tiger Hill. His name is Big something or other, but he won a trial pretty impressive yesterday.